Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, August 28th, 2023. Time for another week of Trump indictments. I guess I don't think there's any more in the pipeline we're waiting for. Trump's surrender week is over. All the excitement, it's all gone from my life. But now, of course, we enter the post-surrender, post-indictment phase for the big Georgia trial. Things are moving along. Plenty to still discuss in terms of legal wrangling and positioning and what Trump is doing with himself after having the big surrender extravaganza, which is, of course, to say fundraising, selling pictures of his or copies of his mugshot signed in real gold ink because he just loves you that much, and et cetera, setting himself up as a martyr for America, telling everybody that this is a picture signed by the only president who cares enough about you to fight so hard that he goes to jail 516 times. That's the position we knew he would take. No issue with that, I guess, except that let's hurry up and convict the guy already and slam the door behind him and let's get on with life. Anyway, plenty to catch up on with that. It is almost the end of August. What did we say it was? The 28th. We said that because it's true, and that means, we're coming to the end of the month. September kicks off, well, all sorts of things. Kids are going back to school. Kids are coming back to Congress, as a matter of fact. And we are a month away from finding out whether we have a government shutdown or not. Well, we're not really a month away from finding out whether we'll have one. We always know we'll have one, but we're a month away from actually having it or forcing through a continuing resolution in order to postpone it for a few days, whatever it's going to be. But Congress returns from their big August recess shortly. It's still a week or so away, I think, before they're all back. I don't know. I didn't check the schedule. Joan's still out, so we got issues with that. But as you know, all I have to do is just remind you of all, just say her name, Joan, boom, government shutdown is coming. So you're all up to date on that, and that's good news. What I'm not up to date on is, and I might as well take this opportunity to jump in here and say it, we have a few more additional boosters to the show to mention who have come in during the month of August. But I've been remiss in not staying abreast of these developments with you. Or I haven't shared them with you. And in 99 times out of 100, that's going to be a disappointment. You all want to hear those names. The 100th name, of course, knows who it is, but they are also anticipating, I think, hearing their name on the air. Perhaps I think people like this. But anyway, with big thanks go out to Cheryl Grossman, who actually was already a supporter and boosted her support for the show via Patreon back on August 11th. So we're going back a ways. And a few days later, a new subscriber via Patreon, Kerry Raphael, joined the gang and has been hanging out here ever since. Mary Hill, who also was previously a subscriber, likewise boosted her subscription. That's always an option for those of you out there. It's always nice to see new names joining the list, but look, the numbers come out just the same if you happen to be boosting your thing. But I also think, well, if you've been subscribing all along, what we really need is for more people to join in. But I think it's very nice. It's a great sign of confidence. And maybe for all of you who are either thinking of joining or who have just joined, it's important for you to know how often and how many people decide, you know what, actually, I kind of joined at this level and I kind of have thought I've gotten more than my money's worth here and maybe want to join in and just throw in a couple of extra. And I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And now, just yesterday, Michael Llewellyn joining us as a new Patreon sponsor. So thanks to all who have done so. We appreciate it. The children in college appreciate it. The people who come to the dinner table at night, they appreciate it too. Thanks very much. I can't thank you enough, but I can go on and on at length when I do decide to thank you. How about that? That seems like a decent way of handling things. Lots more to catch up on as well. Lots of communications from our regular correspondents, some of our irregular correspondents, some of our correspondents who seek more regularity through Metamucil. I don't know, whatever might be the case here. But got a lot of communications to catch up on and give you the word and suggestions of others about directions the show might take, or things, nasty names we might decide to call people, things like that. All sorts of exciting developments having to do with, I don't know, news. And that's what Greg Dworkin is here for. You heard the ringy-dingy noise that announces his presence, and now I say good morning, Greg, and then he'll say something back, and that's how it works. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning.
See?
You know,
Told you.
Friday's show, which was with Armando for your birthdays, the two of you.
That's true.
And I chimed in for 30 seconds at the end, which was fun.
I know. It seemed like I blew the big opportunity to have a 15-minute roundtable, but okay.
Well, that's fine, you know, because I had an idea for a fundraiser and a subscriber supporter.
Oh, thing. All right. People will like that because they like getting things.
If we get 25 people to sign up, Armando will be back, and if we get 50, he won't.
That'll probably work. That's a good fundraiser. Where's my Armando, my one Armando sound effect? All right, when he was calling and while he was driving. That's
exactly
tire screen. I don't know
for
what
75. He'll call in while driving,
right.
You know, I think
with a chandelier in the
just,
car.
I think we should go with this.
What that was?
I think it's a winner.
I think it's a good one, and I'll take it. And you know what? I think we could probably we'd make it to 50. Just
well, if we make it to 50, you don't have to tell them. That's the nice part.
Right. Oh yeah. Less administrative work for me as well.
We raised a whole lot of money thanks to you, Armando. Here's what happened.
Now stay away.
50 people.
It won't happen.
Armando and David and I go back a long, long way, so it's all in fun, all in jest.
Yeah, there wasn't even Twitter back then. Back in those days.
There wasn't. You know, I always tell Armando he's wrong, but the thing is, he's always right factually. That's really not the question. The question is what emphasis you put on the right syllable.
Okay.
And that's why, you know, when we talk about the meaning of this or the meaning of that, he hones in on one thing, which is, you know, is this a legally competent, elegant sort of argument? And I hone in on the political. You know, I'm not a lawyer, but this is how the audience is hearing it.
Yes.
And so they're both true. They're just different truths.
Oh, well, now we need plenty. You got to have a full complement of truths these days.
Right. And for 100, you know, people signing up will tell you about what's the true truth. So the pundit roundup today is kind of interesting because the whole weekend is kind of interesting. Today's a big day politically and legally. Because there are several in different locations federal hearings going on.
Awesome.
What the lawyers call evidentiary hearings, which is to say you have to present facts and you're allowed to call witnesses.
That sounds like what they do.
The incredibly important but second most important one is in D.C., where Judge Chutkan, who's been called by Trump supporters, including the newspapers and the tabloids, a scion of the Marxist revolutionaries.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Because her grandfather happened to be a freedom fighter in Jamaica against the British.
Oh, well, yeah.
Which is what American revolutionaries, kind of admired.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm sure that they did. But as we know...
at least the concept.
Jamaica is super communist right now.
Well, you know, if darker-skinned people do it, maybe it's not so admirable from their point of view.
Oh, my.
But nonetheless, the fact that the New York DA and the Georgia DA and the D.C. judge happened to take a lot of crap from Trump, I'm sure has to do with the fact that, they're all vegetarians.
Yes, right.
Can't think what else they possibly could have in common.
No. Well, he really loves to tempt fate by making racist attacks against the judges who are about to handle his cases. That's
and he himself has held off a little bit on Chutkan in D.C. because that evidentiary hearing today is going to decide, she says, when the trial is going to be for Jack Smith's D.C. January 6th thingy, which is kind of a big deal.
Yes.
But it's not even the biggest deal today because a federal judge is going to have, I guess, a similar evidentiary hearing, and it's federal, therefore no movies, no cameras, no broadcast. You could only text it, and I don't even think you can text it from the room. You either have to be in the outside room looking in on closed circuit, or you have to write about it after the fact. But they're going to have an evidentiary hearing about Mark Meadows. Now, Ruth Bengat, who's a authoritarian specialist, said Meadows is really a super key figure because in all authoritarian plots is always the, capo da capo. There's always the one guy who's coordinating everything and then has direct access to the leader of the cult.
Okay.
And that's Meadows.
Supposed to be. I mean, he's the chief of staff. But,
right.
Well,
so he was coordinating.
Again, he's not supposed to be, isn't it?
And how much was he coordinating all this stuff remains to be seen with evidentiary hearings and trials. That's what they're for.
Yes, that's frequently how they're used.
So we get to find out that stuff. But there's plenty of evidence. And in fact, what's so interesting about that is that he was actually in his briefings saying, okay, a lot of this was politics, but.
Yeah.
And I'm referring to a really nice piece here by Walter Schaub, Norm Eisen, and Joshua Kolb that's in Just Security called The Hatch Act Bars Meadows Removal Bid. Very, very detailed, not only about what the Hatch Act is and what it does.
Not much, but
what but the fact that it's there and Meadows' disrespect for it.
Yeah, well, he's one of 20 members of the Trump administration with no respect for it. Hundreds, I'm sure, have no respect for it, but
that's
who've been caught
no respect for the law. Like it or not, it's a law. So to remove the case to federal court, Meadows will need to show that, this writes, 1, his charged conduct was for or relating to any act under the color of his office, which is a colorful way of saying he was doing official duties.
Yes. That's the legal terminology, color of either color of authority or color of office.
Yeah, and that he had a colorable federal defense to the charges.
I love color for some reason.
The first prong of the removal test is generally considered to have a low threshold in the 11th Circuit, requiring only a causal connection or association. But as both the district attorney and 8 prominent judges and attorneys who served in Republican administrations explain in briefs before the court, it's evidentiary, so you get to present this stuff. Meadows must show a causal connection between the charged conduct and asserted official authority. That is to say, he acted under authority of federal law in the discharge of his duty and only by reason thereof.
Yeah.
So Meadows had no authority as chief of staff to engage in charged conduct. He was subject to the Hatch Act, a law that clearly forbade all federal employees from engaging in the sort of conduct that he was charged with.
Yeah, whoops, that's bad for him.
A specific provision of the Hatch Act negates the possibility of the link Meadows proposes. Put more strongly, the Hatch Act severs any evidentiary or legal thread with which Meadows could hope to tie the chief of staff's official authority to the charged conduct. The law unambiguously prohibits the chief of staff from using, quote, his official authority or influence for the purpose of interfering with or affecting the result of an election, end quote.
Yes.
That's pretty straightforward. Even a non-lawyer can understand that.
Right. I mean, I think it's pretty easy to understand. If he was calling to deal with election outcomes, then there's no possible way he was doing so as a White House official.
Right.
If he was, then he should be in jail for that.
Right.
But if he wasn't, then he has no causal connection.
He's screwed, the article says. So to stitch together the severed thread between his conduct and his former role, Meadows tries in vain to pretend that the Hatch Act doesn't exist.
Well, that doesn't seem.
He just says the state is wrong.
Yeah.
You're wrong in saying I can't do this as part of my official duties. Well, the Hatch Act says you can't. Well, then the state is wrong. So you're saying either the Hatch Act is wrong or I, as my duties as a Trump official, can ignore the Hatch Act when I please. That's
it's not hard for
basically
him
the argument.
to come to that argument. I mean, one of the big, and I think you mentioned one of the co-authors of the piece, was it Walter Schaub? Is that his name? Yeah, he's the former ethics office guy. He's had the biggest 4 years of his life.
Some involvement with the U.S. government at this level, trying to figure this stuff out.
It's just that he was very active in documenting the numerous violations of the Hatch Act by the administration officials. And I think they got it ended up with, didn't they? Somebody did like an inspector general report, and they said it's 19 members of the White House staff should be charged with violations of the Hatch Act.
I mean, this next paragraph almost reads like Schaub wrote it. In tersely declaring the state is wrong to point out he couldn't have committed the charged conduct in his official capacity,
the state is
Meadows
wrong.
would have the court ignore the legal prohibition. The very purpose of the Hatch Act was to place political acts of the kind charged here beyond the reach of the office of chief of staff.
Yes. We don't want the people using the leverage of the power of the federal government at the highest levels to change outcomes of elections.
Right. And so he repeats that. A person who holds the position of White House chief of staff may never use their official authority as a government employee to influence an election.
Yeah, don't do that.
So attempting to create a connection between the charged acts and the authority of his former post, Meadows mischaracterizes the state's argument as disputing whether his conduct was required or considered part of his official duties. The state isn't concerned with what was required or what was probably considered part of his job. The state is concerned with what the law prohibited. The Hatch Act prohibits this stuff from happening. The next part is Meadows argues he has a colorable defense arising out of this duty to enforce federal law. That's an argument that Greg Jarrett used on Fox News. Trump was merely trying to enforce the law, therefore anything he did was okay. And Meadows was just helping him. But the conduct did not arise out of his duties. It arose out of his failure to comply with his duties. So Meadows tries to turn the law on his head by arguing that neither the duties of the chief of staff nor the laws of the Constitution draw a clean line between federal authority on the one hand and elections and politics on the other. But the line is drawn plainly in the Hatch Act, and it couldn't be clearer. An employee may not use his official authority for the purpose of interfering with the results of the election. On one side of that clear line lay a range of actions not prohibited by the Hatch Act, and on the other side lay the range of prohibited actions that could never have a connection to the chief of staff. And that's what he did, and that's why these guys think he should lose the case.
Well, he should, and he should be charged with violating the Hatch Act as well, and give himself a new charge.
If that should happen, because this is almost a mini trial in and of itself, and if Meadows loses, which I hope he will, then the whole case against Trump just gets that much stronger.
Well, good. It should. It was pretty obvious from the beginning. The only issue with everything that Trump did would ordinarily have violated the Hatch Act, but for the fact that they don't enforce the Hatch Act, it doesn't apply to the president because he unites in his single person so often both political and governmental, and they just allow for that. But the people around him are still supposed to obey it. But of course, they were working for a president who frequently just says, if you support me and you break the law, I'll just pardon you. So just forget it. Don't bother reading the books. I'll just pardon you. And
right.
That would be an
interesting
excuse.
by giving some examples of Meadows' attitude toward the Hatch Act.
Let's do that.
Meadows can't plead ignorance of the Hatch Act. Far from being unaware of it, he's been open about his knowledge and disrespect for it. August 2020, Meadows stated, listen, this is a lot of hoopla that's being made about things because a lot of these folks showed up at the convention for Trump in August.
Okay.
Mainly because the convention has been so unbelievably successful. Nobody outside the Beltway really cares. Well, the federal courts are within the Beltway, so too bad for you.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's one problem. Oh, is this the 2020 Republican convention at the White House issue?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Got
Moreover, Meadows' attempt to get the case dismissed by raising federal defenses may have fatally sabotaged his removal effort. Meadows separately contends in arguments he didn't initially raise that even if he were not immune under the Supremacy Clause, his acts would still be protected under the First and 14th Amendment. All of the alleged conduct as to Mr. Meadows relates to protected political activity. So if he's admitting that it was political activity, oops, exactly. Yeah. I'm not a lawyer, and I could see that there's a flaw here.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I guess is sort of how it happens. If you really do believe that the Hatch Act is a nullity, you just go straight at it like that.
Yeah, and then he goes on to say, in his brief to the judge, all the substantive allegations in the indictment concern unquestionably political activity. Yes, that's why you have to get charged in Georgia, you jerk.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Cool. That's a fun thing to do. Yeah, all right. I don't know. I still wonder what he thought the advantage of the removal even was.
Well, there's two advantages. It slows things down just a bit. It keeps cameras out of the trial, but it also gives them a wider jury pool, which includes some more rural counties than Atlanta itself.
Yes, but he was still going to be convicted. But
well, these things are still going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, in that regard, interestingly enough, Greg Sargent has a column today noting that Jim Jordan is going to launch inquiry into Fani Willis.
Oh, okay.
Why would he
Sure.
launch inquiries into Fani Willis?
Because he wants to break the Hatch Act.
Because basically jury nullification, I guess, because he wants to taint the jury. And there's no other reason I could think of.
I mean, generally speaking, that's sort of what they do, right? Anybody who's opposed to them must be working for probably the commies, maybe the Jamaican commies. So you just do that. You launch an investigation, and that's supposed to make people nervous.
Nobody really cares about that. However, it'll be covered on Fox News, and the jury pool will be tainted by it. So we'll see what the judges do about that. On the other hand,
although what it means is that all Fox viewers will end up being struck from the jury pool. But okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great idea.
Do you watch Fox News? Okay, you're out.
Right.
Melanie Zanona points out, however, Kevin McCarthy, under pressure from the right, has told Republicans he's serious about a impeachment inquiry and wants to start in September.
Oh, well, that's soon.
They don't have the votes to start an inquiry. So McCarthy's solution is, well, we'll just start an inquiry. This is one of those, I have the gavel, I can do whatever I please. There's no constitutional law that says I have to have a vote on an inquiry. I'll just declare that there is one. And then we do it. And why are we doing it? Because they can't interfere with Fani Willis and Chutkan in the trials. So because Trump is on trial, therefore you must impeach Biden. They admit they don't have evidence for it, which leads to the next set of articles.
Hey, all right.
Like, for example, Will Bunch over at Philadelphia Inquirer, which is a fantastic article.
There's always an inquiry at the Inquirer.
Yeah, and says, look, I mean, media is failing us.
True.
They failed when we looked at the debate, and I have a few words about the debate to follow up with.
Okay.
They didn't call authoritarianism what it is. And if it turns out that Jim Jordan is simply doing these show hearings in order to interfere with justice, call them on it.
Yeah, please. Make him wear a coat.
So the title of his article, very good one, is Journalism Fails Miserably at Explaining What's Really Happening to America. Momentous week of GOP debate. Trump's arrest gets horse race coverage when the story's not about an election, but authoritarianism.
Well, yes.
So let's do this in order because the discussion is rather long. So we'll leave it for after the debate, after the break, because I want to do some pre and post debate polling in the minute or two we have left before the break.
All right.
To set things up. Emerson Polling kindly polled August 16, 17, and then again 25, 26. So this is hot off the presses. They just published it this morning. Trump went among GOP voters, among those candidates, who would you be most likely to vote for the Republican presidential primary in 2024? Yeah. Trump went from 55 to 49, 55.5 to 49.6, so 55 to 50 or 56 to 50 if you want to look at it that way. So we dropped a little bit. Still in the lead.
Good.
DeSantis went from 10.1 to 11.6. So those people who said, he held his own, he probably didn't do himself a whole lot of good, but, he didn't really drop any. It was good enough for him.
Okay.
We're very happy with it because, he didn't lose anything. That was probably right.
All right.
Ramaswamy. You
You
want to guess his numbers? Or shall I just tell you?
He went to 19.
He was 9.5 pre-debate.
Yeah.
After the debate, 8.8.
What?
So, as we said on the show, he was obnoxious, callow, ignorant.
I thought he was
and all the reporters swooned over it.
Yeah.
And the audience said, I don't know. And I told you
that's amazing.
That the polling done, when we gave you the polling numbers, showed that his favorables had dropped about 10 points.
Yeah.
And it's showing up here.
That's amazing. What a great... So you can get rid of snap polls, but it doesn't change what the people are thinking. They're just, well, you aren't reporting.
And it doesn't change the fact that the pundits are wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
The talking heads are always wrong when they look at these debates.
They got rid of the snap polling because it was embarrassing to see it right next to them on television. And now you got to wait a day.
Let me give you three more names. And for those people who said, well, they did some stuff during the debate which was useful, it's true.
Oh, okay.
Pence went from 3.4 to 6.9.
Huh. Why?
He's in fourth place, mind you, compared to Trump's 49. So just, keep this in perspective. But he went from 3.4 to 6.9 because when you're that tiny in the polls, margin of error allows you to make big changes.
That's true. Right. Yeah, it's a 50% rise in the polls, but it's probably noise.
Yeah, he went from 4 voters to 8 voters.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
Right. Haley went from 1.9 to 6.5, says she helped herself. Everybody said she would, and it's true. But, 1, 2, 3, 4, she's in fifth place. Christie went from 2.8 to 5.2.
Okay.
All right, so people heard him.
Same thing, yeah. Okay.
Same thing. He's not even in double digits. Pence, Haley, and Christie help themselves tremendously and are not in double digits and are going to lose.
Yeah. Well, that's
okay. Ramaswamy wasn't in double digits and he's still not. He lost ground. DeSantis stayed in second place, which is 38 points behind Trump.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I've had a technical problem with my music bed dying out unexpectedly, but I think I can turn some music back on, and we got to get out of here in a few seconds.
All right. Well, just to let you know, Scott went from 2.4 to 1.6. Burgum, Hutchinson, Hurd, Johnson, Suarez, none.
Oops. Okay, and the wrong music at that.
That's
all
okay.
Right.
Music is music. So the point is that some people were helped a little bit, but it didn't change anything really in terms of the dynamics. That's what debates are about.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think that actually timed out pretty well in bringing back the music. And the ultimate solution was wait for a minute with the music dead and then play the 1 minute break music, and then time being what it is, linear and such.
Well, we professionals do the Pee Wee Herman, Pee Wee Herman thing and say, I meant to do that.
There's no disguising that. I don't know. The thing just one of those computer glitches that happens from time to time, and I hope it means everything is fine and we don't have to start over with new ones. All right. So as we were on our way out, we were discovering that a lot of the debate went the way it should have, despite the fact that pundits have been striving mightily to bring back the ancient regime in which they got to declare the winners and everybody said, I guess they're the winners, and then that person would become popular. A couple of years ago, is like going on a dozen years or so, that people have said, you know what, to hell with that. The whole point of watching the debate is for us to get a look at them with our own eyes and make our own decisions, and we're going to do it.
Although many of you didn't want to watch.
Well, that's true. And it doesn't really matter if we watch, I guess, the Republican debate per se, but as it turns out, regular-ish sort of people, I mean, I guess within tolerances, right? He's given the fact that there are Republicans who will watch the debate.
If you watch Fox News, you're going to watch a debate.
Yeah, but they react pretty much the same way as normal, actual human beings. When
Which
they say they like somebody,
the
they
people
like them.
who were in the audience at the debate, which were not normal, actual human beings. They were Trump people.
Yes, that's true. And I guess
so they kept cheering
like
every time something was good for Trump
good.
or bad for Trump, and they booed when it was the opposite. And that is not the Republican primary voter, and the Republican primary voter is not the general election voter.
That's true.
So that when normies are looking at that or seeing clips of it later on, what they're getting is, a pretty good sense of what's going on here. There's a really, really good piece in the Dispatch from David Drucker on this. David Drucker used to be at the Washington Examiner, but I liked him because he was the one reporter that I used to read there. Because he was like Robert Costa. He had good contacts and he wrote good stuff that nobody else was writing. Now he's at the Dispatch, so I don't read the Washington Examiner anymore, which is a plus for me.
Yes,
and the Dispatch says GOP candidates wobble on Trump again. Despite months to prepare, Republican presidential hopefuls still knocked off balance by Trump debate questions. And he gives us an example. When the candidates were instructed to raise their hand if they plan to support Trump as the GOP nominee, even if he is found guilty in a court of law, Florida Governor DeSantis, who was center stage, looked first to his left, then to his right before sheepishly lifting his arm halfway. He was followed by Pence, who, like the Florida governor, only jumped in after seeing Ramaswamy, Haley, Scott, Burgum with their hands in the air.
I see.
John Thune in Milwaukee to lend a hand to the Scott campaign. Said the candidates are all trying to grapple with the fact that Trump's prospects in the GOP primary seem to improve every time he's indicted on one alleged misdeed or another, but the South Dakota Republican conceded that if they have any chance of taking the front runner down, they're going to have to do a better job of addressing Trump's legal woes in the future. In other words, Thune was a Scott surrogate and couldn't say the obvious, so I'll say it. One of the reasons Trump is helped by these indictments is that all the other candidates are god-awful.
Yeah, well, exactly.
So these candidates will have to, Thune says, probably come up with some more fulsome answers to that question.
Fulsome. Wow.
The truth is, we all have to be held accountable. The question is, were there laws broken? And if there were, is justice going to be served? In other words, the guy really is on trial, and it's legitimate to ask those questions, and let's see what happens in a court of law. And that's about the closest GOP candidates and officials could or would ever come, excepting Christie and Hutchinson, to saying, let's see what happens at the trial, rather than they're weaponizing the Department of Justice.
Right. Now,
DeSantis distinguished himself yet again during the 2-hour primetime debate. Again, this is David Drucker, by dodging question about Pence on January 6th, talking instead about what he sees about the weaponization of federal agencies. Only after the moderators pointed out you didn't answer the question and Pence interjected to argue voters deserve to know, the governor relented kind of and said, well, I've answered this so many times. I've answered this before. Mike did his duty. I got no beef with him. But here's the thing. Is what we're going to be focused on going forward, the rehashing of this? I'll tell you, the Democrats would love that. Actually, America would love that. They think Trump's guilty.
Yeah.
We already seen the polling on that.
Okay. I don't know why
You're presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, but the public doesn't need that to understand that Trump was criming.
Right. Okay.
They believe majority of voters Trump was doing a crime, and the majority of voters really don't want to vote for him again, which doesn't mean he automatically loses, because they don't necessarily want to vote for Biden either. Particularly voters in the Republican side are tribal, and that's why that tribal thing is so important. So Ramaswamy undoubtedly had one of the standout performances. When you stand out, it's not always a good thing, by the way.
That's true. Yes.
Right. That said, the fence sitting we saw, says Drucker, on stage is unlikely to work. Voters in the Trump area value boldness and authenticity. The former president's ability to make his GOP rivals look like equivocating politicians is another reason why he remains the leader of the pack, and more likely than not to stay on top. None of this is lost on the Trump campaign. It's like a panic deer in the headlight, Trump Jr. told reporters in Milwaukee after the debate, wasting little time using the candidate's hesitation to address questions about the frontrunner. Trump's eldest son was referring to DeSantis, but he might as well have been speaking about most of his rivals.
Well, that's true.
So the fact of the matter is they're all wishy-washy traditional politicians. And, you know, the problem with that is that that's who they are. And the media insists on covering them as if that's what's going on. Trump is having none of it. And by the way, Trump's patience with Republicans, Melanie Zanona writes, is starting to wear thin. Yesterday, he complained to Truth Social that the House GOP isn't moving fast enough on the Biden impeachment. Either impeach the bum or fade into oblivion, he wrote. So the pressure on McCarthy to do that impeachment thing is based on the fact that these hearings are taking place. The trial is real. Even John Thune is saying, well, you know, we'll see what happens in a court of law. They can't do anything about it because Jim Jordan is ineffectual. He's going to try to taint the jury, but he'll have a better amount of luck tainting the jury if it's a wider Georgia jury pool. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to keep the trial where it is, which is, as you've pointed out so often, that's where the crime was.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's just, yeah.
Of course, crime took place all over the country, so maybe it could take place in West Virginia. But Fani Willis's RICO thing is centered in Georgia. And one of the things that proves that it's centered in Georgia is that today's evidentiary hearing is involving people associated, the only witnesses she's calling, people associated with the Raffensperger thing.
Mm-hmm. Aha. Okay.
Okay. She's got Raffensperger. She's got his chief investigator. She's got two other people that were on the call with Raffensperger. Those are the four witnesses that are being called.
All right.
And as Professor Siegel, Eric Siegel, I think his name is, at Georgia State, pointed out, people have to understand that the reason that Raffensperger's call is the center of this is that it wasn't a one-off. It was months' worth of having pressure from Trump in various stages and ways, which is the reason why he taped the call. He knew this was coming, and he wanted to protect himself.
Yeah, it wasn't an accident or where you called a recorded line or anything like that. This was, oh, my God, he's calling me again. We better record this because there's a crime
And why? Because of everything that happened beforehand. So the question on the table is going to be, is that sort of evidence presented at the evidentiary hearing today? That's why people are calling it a mini trial, and they're so interested to see what happens with Mark Meadows. And that's why I said it's a little bit more important hearing than the one with Jack Smith and Chutkin, although that's obviously important too. But that's merely going to set a trial date. This one is going to actually delve into what are the issues, what are the evidence, who are the witnesses, what's going to happen. And the result here is, as Joe Biden might say, a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. I'm glad. That puts it well. I think a very fine point put on it at the end. Just a reminder about how that phone call got recorded. It wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was Brad Raffensperger saying, "I'm very rapidly becoming the victim of a crime here." And it's so outrageous what they're asking. People won't believe it if I just say it. We absolutely have to have Donald Trump in his own voice on tape committing this crime. And he's already committed it. And I wish we had recorded the last 5 phone calls, but we better record this one and everything going forward. And I hope they give some time to explaining that and that Raffensperger gets the chance to lay that out, or a good lawyer at least leads him down that path. I have a feeling he wants to tell that story.
Right. So this is sort of interesting and is one of the better reads today.
Yes.
And it's by Aaron Zitner, who is a reporter and editor at the Wall Street Journal, conservative.
Oh, well.
Not just the paper.
Too bad for you.
But Zitner is. But, you know, he put something up which is really interesting, and then Will Bunch had a nice retort to it.
Okay.
So here's why I'm presenting it to you. And it does help explain a little bit about the resistance to fact on the Republican side. Why tribalism took over our politics, social science gives an uncomfortable explanation. Our brains were made for conflict.
Oh.
It was the latest example of a Republican former president employing a potent drive for Americans' partisan divide, group identity. In the end, they're not coming after me, they're coming after you, he said at a campaign rally. Decades of social science research show that our need for collective belonging is forceful enough to reshape how we view facts and affect our voting decisions. When our group is threatened, we rise to its defense. And, you know, you've heard numerous examples on the show about people think a certain thing and then you hear it's associated with Trump and then they start thinking the opposite. Mm-hmm. And they're not basing it on anything other than, oh, that's our side, that's the other side. Yes. Which is why policy never, with the exception proving the rule, drives elections. Abortion policy is the exception that proves the rule. That is so overwhelming. It blots out even this. But for like normal things, the research helps explain why Trump has solidified his standing as the front runner despite facing 4 indictments. Democrats are using the tactic too, if not as forcefully. The Biden campaign criticized Republicans in Wednesday's presidential debate as extreme candidates who would undermine democracy, and Biden himself has accused MAGA Republicans of trying to destroy our systems of government. And as Will Bunch later on points out,
they are.
That's because they are.
Right, yeah, okay. I had a feeling he might think they were.
Right, so the split in the electorate has left many Americans fatigued and worried that partisanship is undermining the country's ability to achieve its problems. But that's because you're not calling out the Republicans for the fascism and authoritarianism that they're in the middle of doing.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
instead
it's
of
not
going
just
into the
the
voting booth and asking, what do I want my elected representatives to do for me? They're thinking, if my party loses, it's not just that my policy preference aren't going to get done, said Liliana Mason, a Johns Hopkins University political scientist. It's who I think I am, my place in the world, my religion, my race, the many parts of my identity are all wrapped up in that one vote. And that's true. And if you don't understand that, then you're just going to talk about policy issues as if that's the only thing in the world. A policy issue has to be so extremely important to you that it transcends that. Abortion does. Very few other things do.
Yes.
Right? Views on the IRS ain't going to do it.
No. And it's
unless
an old mode
you're
of
rich.
An old mode of conducting our politics. When back when I don't know, back in the olden days, I mean, there was still partisanship, of course, but back when it was not forbidden, at least for one party, to actually say, well, we might meet in the middle on some compromises with respect to policy. We'll both come at it from our own angles and find middle ground or whatever. Well, then it had to be about discussing policy, because the settlement was about how each side, gave ground in order to achieve a policy result. But now, of course, I guess largely driven by at least one party, the Republican Party, saying it's now platform policy not to cooperate with the other party no matter what the policy outcome. And that's okay because our voters don't care about policy.
Right.
It makes it impossible. And that's, I think probably
that's where
part
we
of
are.
what
And that's how come
short-circuited the press.
Shut down.
Yeah, and so the poor media who venerates bipartisanship, that's the only atmosphere in which reporting on policy makes any sense.
And
that doesn't mean that they've moved them off of it.
Our media is failing us.
Yeah, they're still doing the policy thing, but it doesn't make any particular sense because there's no one discussing any.
Right.
All right.
And, of course, one of the two sides doesn't care about policy at all.
Yeah.
They just care about winning.
Yes. And it forces the other side to feel the same.
In fact, they're not good at policy. They don't understand policy. They lie about policy. Vivek Ramaswamy is the extreme example.
It's so clearly the case that, if you're wondering how did they end up so backwards and wrong-footed on abortion, the answer is, but they never understood policy from the beginning. It just looked like they did because they made it their position to disagree with the other side's policy no matter
they
what.
They wanted the abortion voters.
Yeah.
The anti-abortion voters.
While one side was still talking about, I guess maybe they figured as long as Democrats continue to talk about policy, if we criticize them, we can claim we're talking about policy. For people who think that that's the place where politicians should be, good, we'll be able to fool them into thinking we're actually having policy discussions. And then eventually the policy became so egregious that they were, I guess it pulls the rug out or removes the veneer there. The mask comes off. It's obviously never was about policy, because if it was, they would have come to a different conclusion a long time ago.
So Ben Pershing, who's politics editor at the Wall Street Journal, said, this was a great piece.
Oh.
So interesting, so revelatory. And the reason it's revelatory to people like Ben Pershing is exactly what you said, because the media is still in this, both sides cover both. There must be some golden mean middle ground that's the ideal where policy rules. And, of course, it doesn't. And that's why it was so revelatory to him. Everybody else knew this.
Well, all right.
So Patrick Murray, who's the Monmouth pollster, very good one, says a really good piece on identity, which social scientists have been pointing out for years. The reason it's revelatory to journalists is because they still operate under a rational choice paradigm based on the questions I field about what influences the electorate. For example, for a large swath of the public, the primary reason Biden does or does not get credit for an apparently improving economy is because it either supports or is a threat to their identity to do so. That's powerful, something Trump intrinsically, if not intentionally, gets, said Patrick Murray.
Okay. Well, as long as it's sad that it's revelatory, but I guess it's better that it be revelatory than be missed again.
Right. Back to Will Bunch in his column. If you watch the hours of TV news coverage during an especially momentous week in August, there's little sense of that reality. And for long stretches of pundit blather, none at all, as talking heads gave earnest high school debating marks to candidates who were all but ignored by the GOP voter base, like Haley, Pence, Christie. The disconnect deepened the next night as Trump turned what surely would be his comeuppance, his surrender Atlanta's bug-infested county jail for fingerprinting and a mugshot, into an outlaw display of authoritarian force. A remarkable night of imagery over substance, but there was little discussion of why this accused felon was getting a phalanx of dozens of motorcycle cops. Trump's glowering mugshot instantly became the most talked about picture in American history, but not one pundit was able to explain why tens of millions of everyday voters were so eager to return to the White House this man who attempted a coup on January 6th, or why his poll numbers rise with indictments. I guess the 20th century author and socialist Upton Sinclair really nailed it when he wrote, "It's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on not understanding it." Of course, you know I love that line. I used it as my signature line at Daily Kos when we had one. America is entering its most important pivotal year since 1860, and the U.S. media is doing a terrible job explaining what's happening. To many of us, with our highfalutin poli-sci degrees and our dog-eared copies of Richard Ben Kramer's What It Takes, are still covering elections like it's the 20th century. What we're building toward on November 5th, 2024 might have the outward trappings of an election, but it's a show of force. What we call the Republican Party is barely a political party in any sense of the word, but a dangerous antisocial movement that's embraced many of the tenets of fascism, from calls to violence to dehumanizing of others, from desperate refugees to transgender youth. There is, in reality, no 2024 primary because this movement embraced Trump.
Yes.
Right? If you watch enough not Fox cable TV news, you'll occasionally see an expert on fascism like Ruth Ben-Ghiat from NYU or Yale's Timothy Snyder explaining the roots of this. But then it's back to your regular programming, including a desperate desire to frame today's clash in terms of tribalism that plagues both sides. And there we go, circle back to the tribalism thing we were looking at.
Right.
Some of the media's worst avatars of what increasingly feels like hopeless democracy nostalgia are so-called never-Trump conservatives like Kathleen Parker. It was Parker who famously predicted on the eve of the 2016 election that a victorious Trump would dress up and behave at state dinners, be funny when called upon. It's the most notoriously wrong column of all time. Calm down, we'll be fine no matter who wins. Rather than slowly back into the bushes like Homer Simpson, Parker's still pining for normalcy, declaring last week that Haley won the Milwaukee debate, as if that mattered.
Yeah, well, that's...
and then he singles out Peter Baker, too. Right. The news media better get comfortable talking about what's really happening in places like Farmville, Virginia, like Oliver Anthony. They ought to be explaining both the legitimate anger and the manipulation of that anger by demagogues like Trump. Now, Oliver Anthony isn't the only one doing a better job discussing this in our journalists. And by the way, over the weekend, he said, look, the song was about the people on the GOP stage.
Oh, all right. Well, that's a good save for him.
But also to warn his fellow Democrats, Bernie Sanders, that they need to do a much better job of addressing the discontents of the American middle class. Almost on cue, Ramaswamy goes on CNN Sunday morning with a dark right-wing appeal that is the change that far too many people are seeking, and a stunning riff that blamed this weekend's racist mass shooting in Jacksonville by a white gunman on anti-racism in the media. He insisted that the media, universities, and certain politicians have rekindled racism, and I can think of no better way to fuel racism than by taking something away from people based on their skin color, meaning white people. He said that. The cause of all this racism is you're really picking on white people.
You made me a Nazi. Again, I mean, there's literally
So
now
that's
a
why
guy
I
with a
say that when
swastika
you look
on
at
his
Ramaswamy,
gun.
you have to treat him like a callous, ignorant, authoritarian, con man, grifter.
Well, yes. He
When
made
you
it
do
easy.
that, his numbers drop.
Good. All right. Well, he's right about that for sure. One of the few clips that I did see of him over the weekend. I mean, it certainly becomes easier. Let's say for fans of the show, there's at least one clip that will make it positively a breeze for you to treat him as an ignorant, callow, lying moron with no idea how anything works. But I gather that's actually the thrust of almost any clip of Ramaswamy speaking anywhere.
By the way, I don't know if you know this, but he never votes.
That doesn't surprise me. He doesn't know how it works. The one clip that I did see or pay attention to was, I guess Chuck Todd asked him, what would you have done if you were in Mike Pence's place on January 6th? Did you see that one? That was an interesting answer. And his answer was, he launched into his election reform platform and said,
right.
I would have just insisted that they pass that or else I wouldn't certify the vote. I'd hold the whole thing hostage and then I'd force the Congress to adopt this thing. Yeah. And then the president would sign it and then we would have that reform. And then we could count the votes. It was an interesting thought underlying it, which was, I guess he was trying to get around to saying, well, it was the thing you could distill out of it for the election results was he would have ended up certifying the 2020 election results and making Biden president and acknowledging it, but then saying, but we'll get you, we'll just wait until next year and then we'll have a 2024 election on a foundation of good, solid democracy where everybody's vote's going to be counted correctly and we'll cheat and win that. But
well, if you want to feel better about the world, I will point out amongst all of this garbage that Ramaswamy did drop in the polls.
That is good news.
And Ron DeSantis was booed when speaking late Sunday at a vigil held for the 3 victims of a racially motivated shooting in Jacksonville.
Well, all right.
People saw him for who he was.
Good.
And there's a wonderful picture of a local state senator staring at him as he's speaking.
Oh.
Because it's just awful.
And then, of course, the accusation later, when the DeSantis campaign regroups, they'll say, see, these people are politicizing these shootings too soon. But, of course, if people are murdered in your state by a racist maniac, you should, be upfront about that and say what the problem is.
I will find the picture.
All right.
But here's another picture I'm sending you.
Oh, all right. Well,
of just somebody in the crowd looking at DeSantis. If you want to know what side-eye is, I'm going to send you a couple of pictures.
Well, that's
that
the definition.
Will be in the dictionary next to what is side-eye.
My God. I mean, that's exactly what it is. But that's clearly a generous reaction. That might have been one of the less racist things he said because she's just sort of given him I would say that's 95% side-eye, 5% eye roll. But there are some others whose eyes are obscured by sunglasses who may, in fact, be glowering. Wow.
Yes.
Well, we didn't get to. I missed the opportunity to discuss that news because we are once again, of course, under the cloud of a mass shooting. Although, I guess we've had the weekend to live it out, so it's not quite as raw. But yes. We're back there again, and back to the argument that it's not the guns per se, it's something else. You made these people with guns be racist, or the other view of it, of course, you made it too easy for racists to get guns, so easy that they can afford to paint some of them with swastikas and not ruin the resale value.
Well, that's not a subtle thing.
No.
Speaking of making sure that we mention stuff.
Yes.
There are hurricanes blowing.
Yeah, that's true. And God is pointing it at Florida,
right.
Apparently, if you ask the right people about that. Why is God targeting Florida? One wonders.
So I guess Wednesday-ish, Wednesday to Thursday, they might be hit by a major hurricane. Jim Cantore, the weather guy, woke up and said, this looks worse this morning than I was expecting. That's not good for Florida.
Yeah, and he always expects the worst. So, yeah, there's a co-branding thing, by the way. I don't know. I'm going to have to work this out with Jim Cantore, the Weather Channel, and Waffle House.
Really?
can figure this out somehow. But basically,
Well, that
you know
makes
that
total
there's a
sense.
disaster
Waffle House
going on.
stay open, and that's
Right.
one of the places
And-
you can go in a hurricane if you
and-
get flooded out.
Yeah, and Jim Cantore is in the business of saying, whatever you do, don't do what I'm doing, standing outside in a hurricane, because it's crazy here. Everybody should be evacuating.
But the fact
Except
is,
me.
Cantore is not an idiot. He doesn't go
No.
to the worst part of the hurricane.
Well-
He goes to the part that's the worst where he can actually stand.
That's
I don't
that's
know
a
if you
point that
recall,
doesn't
but
get
NBC had a bunch of people
made
who were
very
actually
often.
blown away on live TV by hurricanes.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I can believe that. And you know, if you think Jim Cantore is crazy for going,
If you
all
think
the
this
time,
is bad, down the street is
yeah,
even worse.
that's a point that really does need to be made. Maybe he could do himself a favor by pointing that out, or maybe he does. I don't watch every minute of his coverage, but if he could just say, I'm in harm's way. This is not great, but there are worse places to be, but I keep doing this. I'm able to keep doing this because I don't stand where you'll die.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm telling you, if you live over there, you need to be either in your basement or you should have left a week ago. And you're just not seeing Jim Cantore get hit by stop signs for a
Right.
reason.
I found the picture I wanted to send you.
Okay.
It's Representative Angie Nixon, who's given interviews on this, but look at her expression as she looks at
hold on a second. I got to get rid of the
DeSantis.
other one. I'm still. Oh boy. Oh my gosh. There's going to be a fight. Holy mackerel.
Yeah, she's sizing him up for like what
Phew.
the hot sauce goes on him before I eat him alive.
Man, okay. All right. Well, that is a hell of a picture. If you have tweeted those around, where can I get those that I can share with people? Oh, maybe you should tweet.
Oh,
them
I
if
will
you
tweet
haven't.
this one
Yeah.
because it's from the NAACP.
Oh,
So I will send that one over to you.
okay. Wow. All right. Yeah, we can look forward to that one. If you're on that weird app that Elon Musk owns, you'll be able to see that instantaneously. And if not, I will share it with you later via Scott Anderson, who had his birthday over the weekend. So, okay.
Happy birthday.
Very good. Thanks so much, Greg. And let's see if everything's working correctly. Then the music will be playing. That's good news. Stay with us, music. Just don't die out in the middle. And all right. So yeah, Monday we have another day in between, and then we have another one of you on Wednesday. So that's great. Fantastic.
Another one of me, isn't one
Yeah.
enough?
We're cloning you and storing you in cold storage in Connecticut. All right, well, stay out of the hurricane's path. I don't think that's a problem. And we'll see you on Wednesday. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Man, all right, well, I'll share this picture with you. Again, if you're listening live and you got to see this picture sooner rather than later, I guess you can go on the Bird site if you're still there and take a look at Greg's feed. But if not, we'll provide it to you later. We'll just give you a link to his Bird tweet. Or maybe he'll put it on Mastodon. Or maybe he'll put it on Blue Sky. I don't even know if he's on Blue Sky yet. Anyway, that thing is slow in developing. Blue Sky, I don't know. It feels the most like the old Twitter, but, I don't know. This idea of having the invites and everything, I'm sure that's probably a good idea, technically speaking, in order to keep the numbers manageable and therefore not crash their site while they're trying to develop it, I guess. But anyway, it's just kind of unfortunate because I think if we could just move everybody over there, then it would absolutely feel exactly like Twitter did. But growing pains for everybody. And Greg says Threads has, I guess, much the same problem. It doesn't operate by invitation, but it's just a matter of getting people settled over there. And I think there's a mounting level of frustration, certainly in my case, and maybe for everybody else. Like, there's 5 different places that could potentially emerge, and I can't be it feels dumb to post the same thing over and over again on the different platforms, because a lot of people are on all those platforms. And you end up, I don't know, looking like a robot if you're doing that. And I try to keep, the content of each conversation genuine. so I try not to do a whole lot of cross-posting there. But anyway, I don't know. Blue Sky is the one that I think feels the most like Twitter, and I wish people would all move over to, but I wish they'd open up the invitation process so that more of you could be there. Although I do see quite a number of the people who used to listen to the show and follow along via Twitter showing up one after the other on Blue Sky, so that's good news. And, all right, wherever we settle, I hope it works. Okay, let's see. Other things to catch up with. There are many. And, I gotta kind of reload what's, been going on and what I've captured for you, and been holding over the weekend via Pocket. And, let's see. Where do we want to, pick up with this one? I think I'm on backlog, really, with a lot of these things, and some of the stories that I wanted to share that might have been, they were a little hotter last week, but still things to catch up on and important background. Let me start with this one because it is important background. And also I did see via social media earlier, I can't remember which one it was, but saying that things are heating up at the federal courthouse in D.C., it's, as they were saying, still August, but extremely busy there because there's so much going on. There's all sorts of the evidentiary hearings in Jack Smith's cases are going forward, but also I think this week is sentencing for some of the Proud Boys convicts from the seditious conspiracy convictions. So there's plenty to do there, and there's lots going on. So while we're talking about some of these seditious conspirators being sentenced, let me bring this up from the New Republic. Speaking not of the Proud Boys, but of the Oath Keepers. But of course, that's an easy transition because both the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers members convicted of seditious conspiracy, and so. They operated under different leaderships, but as the part of the same conspiracy. And so this may very well apply to Proud Boys as well as it does to Oath Keepers. We've always suspected this might be the case, but now some emerging evidence hard evidence of actual problematic wrongdoing going on. And I guess this would probably violate the Hatch Act somewhere too, if we look closely enough at it. But the New Republic's piece here, what's the date on this thing? I don't know. I can't find it immediately. There it is, August 23rd. So heading into, I guess, a midweek last week. Secret Service agents. These are people who, I guess, likewise can violate the Hatch Act if you take a close look at what they're doing. Secret Service agents were in contact with far-right Oath Keepers. Why, one wonders. A new report reveals members of the Secret Service were in communication with the group's radical leader, Stuart Rhodes, himself, of course, convicted of seditious conspiracy. Secret Service agents were in contact with Oath Keepers leader Stuart Rhodes before he helped lead an insurrection on the Capitol on January 6th, 2021, in case you forget what year it was, according to a new report. Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, or CREW, for short, published emails on Wednesday revealing that a member of the Secret Service told other agents in September of 2020 that he had received a call from Rhodes informing him that the far-right white nationalist group planned to provide, quote, security details around Donald Trump's visit to Fayetteville, North Carolina. So that's kind of interesting all by itself. The email detailed that the Oath Keepers' security detail would be composed of, quote, primarily retired law enforcement / former military members who are very pro-LEO, law enforcement officer, and pro-Trump. Their stated purpose is to provide protection and medical attention to Trump supporters if they come under attack, yikes, by leftist groups, which, of course, they never did. But it's an interesting communication in the first place. In the past, it was probably something that the Secret Service would basically approach by saying, yes, thanks, but no thanks. We've got this. the security around the president will be provided by the Secret Service, not Secret Service wannabes, not Meal Team 6 or Gravy SEALs, as they sometimes call them, not wannabes, not LARPers, but the Secret Service. But, of course, the problem is that, one, the Secret Service, well, you know, it was always pretty right-wing and militant, but that was part of the mission, I think. But that's part of the problem, is that there's a right-wing ideology that can disguise itself as zeal for the mission and metastasize if you're not careful with it, or if you intentionally cultivate it, as Donald Trump did, by giving people dual roles as campaign aides / deputy White House chief of staff / active Secret Service agent, as Trump did, then you're only going to make things worse. And I mean, that's kind of what Trump is all about, making things worse. Anyway, as a result, there's this communication with a right-wing white nationalist group that ends up being accused of and convicted of seditious conspiracy and attempting to overthrow the United States government. But for several months in 2020, the Secret Service is happy and patting itself on the back for cultivating this relationship with a bunch of super patriots who are pro-LEO and are, in fact, ex-law enforcement officers and former military. And that's all the cover that they need. In the right-wing mind, you say, well, I'm former military. Yeah, but did you suck at being in the military? Were you terrible? Were you a white nationalist just LARPing as a military member in exchange for free meals and medical care and socialisms, which you don't recognize as socialisms, in exchange for the right to walk around with guns every once in a while and dress in tactical uniforms? I mean, some of these guys, as it turns out, were of almost no use to the military while they were in there. And instead, it turns out that they were only in it for fashion tips. And then now they're ex-military and they dress as though they were still military and pretend they're Navy SEALs, etc., etc. Anyway, back to the story. The email detailed that the Oath Keepers security detail would be composed of primarily, you know, retired law enforcement, etc., and that's supposed to make it okay somehow. And their fake mission to protect Trump supporters if they come under attack by leftist groups. That's, again, there's something what we might say, that's a job for the police. That's why they're there. That's why we're all paying them overtime, and they're making a small fortune standing around every time Trump shows up. But they want to do it for free because, not because they're anti-capitalist, but because they're looking for a thrill more than anything else. This is my hobby. My hobby is dressing up in tactical gear and looking for an excuse to shoot people that I don't like. And here's one. And will you let me do it? And then the real answer from a real Secret Service is not only no, but we'll arrest you if you show up. But instead, they give them a pass. That's the story. We have a liaison between them and the seditious conspiracists and say, we'll let you LARP and role play because you're, quote unquote, on our side, as opposed to faithfully executing the law and saying, no, people who do this are not on our side. We're on our side. Let's get rid of these guys. The Secret Service member who spoke to Rhodes even admitted to other members in the agency that he was an Oath Keeper himself. So it's not hard to see how he gets fooled by the Oath Keeper ideology. He's bought into it hook, line, and sinker and is attempting to convince the agency of their value because he's a double agent. I am the unofficial liaison to the Oath Keepers, and then parenthetically, inching towards official, he wrote. Now, who would make it official? The only thing that could be official about it is what he's saying. He's unofficially an Oath Keeper, but he's becoming one officially or something like that. Because I hope to God that he's not trying to say that there's something in the works inside the Secret Service at the agency level to officially recognize him as liaison to the seditious conspiracist insurrectionists plotting to overthrow the United States government, because that would be a pretty big failing on the part of the Secret Service, if you ask me. The Crew report confirms Rhodes' claims last year that the far-right group had contact with the Secret Service. He wasn't lying. Rhodes admitted this during his trial when he was charged with seditious conspiracy for attempting to stop Joe Biden's presidential win. You might wonder why he would admit it, and the answer is he probably thought that meant I'm not guilty of seditious conspiracy because I'm actually collaborating with the government. But what it really means is that some Secret Service agents ought to be arrested and tried for seditious conspiracy as well. Anyway, it's not clear from the Crew report whether the contact continued past September 2020, but the government watchdog notes that the agent claiming to be an unofficial liaison suggests a longer-term relationship. In addition to having ties to the January 6th insurrection, Oath Keepers have worked alongside the Ku Klux Klan. Problematic. Deploying members at polling sites to watch voters and have compared Hillary Clinton to Hitler on their website, which seems like a pretty inapt comparison, if you ask me, considering that there's a better one staring you right in the face, the other guy who was running for president that time that Hillary Clinton did. Anyway, seems of some interest and something you ought to perhaps keep an eye on, and now an emerging body of evidence for just how deep the connections were and how problematic they could be. I wonder if there's a link here perhaps to the report from Crew. You would think that would be a link. There it is. Crew published emails. Where did they publish them? Is it just on their own website? Yeah, I guess so. So I don't know. I might spend some time reviewing those emails, but that looks to be, I think, like a pretty good summation of the facts there. It might be something worth taking a closer look at in detail, but we certainly get the gist of things from TNR on that one. Seems to me like it might be something worth reading, though, the fuller report. All right, let's see. Other items that I was holding in reserve for discussion. Oh, right. I meant to bring up there were audience members and listeners who had some thoughts about the show in recent days. Also, lots of thanks for Armando for showing up. But let's see. I have this message here. Crossing up some of the themes that we were discussing last week. Paul McDonald writing and saying that I know why he knows that I usually refer to that person that sometimes gets the honor of being known by their three initials, MTG, that I usually call her Murder. Well, he says Murdery Taylor Green, but I always say Murdery Trader Green, or at least I try to remember to say it. But you know who we're talking about. And Paul was saying, there's an opportunity here, given that we found out about the real truth underlying the Iowa State Fair butter cow, which, as it turns out, is a chicken wire cow smeared with butter. And I mean, at that point, it could be made of anything. And you know what they should do? I was just thinking, maybe like what state fair would be best for this? New York, Florida? We should make a cream cheese cow on the cream cheese afterwards. But a cream cheese cow with bagels nearby would be ideal. I guess, it's easy enough to do if you start with a chicken wire frame. Anyway, but no, finding out that was a fake butter cow, which might just as well, I think, as Greg was saying, be referred to as a margarine cow since it's fake butter. But maybe we ought to highlight the phoniness of Murdery Trader Green by calling her Margarine Taylor Green as opposed to Marjorie, of course. And that does make good sense. Certainly well worth considering. So I appreciate that, Paul. And that's we'll leave that as an open question, and we can switch back and forth, I think, if you like, and refer to her one way or the other. We'll all wink and understand which person we're talking to. Oh, look at this! By the way, in late breaking news, and now this is the closest I've ever come to announcing the Patreon support as it happens. But here, and what's today? I'm going to write down the date here because it's important to know, and then I can check it off as I tell you that our relatively new, I think, good friend and supporter whose fun online screen name that we get to use is Hipster Bitch. How hip is Hipster Bitch? The answer is so hip that she just increased her pledge via Patreon. I feel like we're doing some sort of telethon, and maybe we ought to just do that. Oh, Labor Day weekend is coming up. If you're old enough to remember growing up with the weirdly attractive tedium of the Jerry Lewis telethon over the Labor Day weekend, you can appreciate this. I was going to stay on for 24 hours straight begging for money. It could work. Now, it was worth doing, of course, for Jerry Lewis because the money wasn't going to him, so it didn't look quite as ridiculous as a telethon for yourself would. But you get the idea. Well, thank you, Hipster Bitch, for responding so quickly to the call. And again, thanks to everyone who does this, and I hope that I can continue the practice of more closely in time following up your commitment to the show with our commitment to thanking you for doing it. Okay, let's see. There are a couple of other things that I definitely had parked, and maybe I should check the social media inputs here so that we can make sure we're not missing anything here. Let's see. Oh, yeah, some lovely praise for Armando and his appearance on the show from bird site user LaFontaine70, who says to Armando, after he was commenting on something that Judge Chutkan is up to, saying you were good on the show KITM, although saying you were good on using my handle KagroX. It's not just my show, but thank you. Gaming out the crummy defenses in the various cases. Why don't those TV lawyers do more of that? Pretty illuminating. I thought so at the time, so I'm glad to know that other listeners thought so too. This was in response to Armando commenting on Carol Leonig reporting via the Bird site that, let's see, Judge Chutkan, whose colleagues call her demanding but never high-handed, will likely give Trump more time to prepare for the January trial date that Jack Smith requested, or I guess more time than the request of a January trial date, but not much more. Maybe March is the reporting, according to NPR. Armando commenting here, I agree with this opinion, but it should not be a news story. We will all know soon enough. Let's stick to the facts. Oh, okay, interesting. So it would be worthwhile then saying maybe there will be a later date than the January trial that was requested by the prosecution, and end it there, as opposed to trying to make it a story about Judge Chutkan and how she operates. Although, fair enough to say, well, here's a person that could be heavy-handed and force a January trial because the prosecution asked for it. But instead, she's just a regular judge that does things regular ways by listening to both parties and coming to a reasonable conclusion to give each defendant an adequate opportunity to mount a zealous defense. Okay. But at any rate, then Armando answers LaFontaine here, who says, you were good. How come the TV lawyers don't do more of that? And Armando was saying they try, and actually my beef is that they get out over their skis beyond their knowledge, especially in the state cases. I've dug really deep on the 1512 stuff, so I feel confident on that point. Don't really venture beyond that. And of course, as Greg told us in one of the articles that he shared with us last week, that's one of the big problems of legal punditry. They sort of feel obligated to fill column space, and they don't necessarily wait until they know what's going on in order to do it. But it's not limited to legal punditry in that sense, certainly. Okay, let's see. I'm sure there are some other things, reader-contributed things out there to share, to catch up on, and I just have to remember what they are. Oh, as a matter of fact, one of them, I'm going to have to scroll back or look for did I star it? If I did a good job organizing, I would have starred the things I wanted to share. Yeah, and there they are. Excellent. So let's see. How far back do I have to go to pull everything in here? Okay. Let's see. We have this contribution from John Shiflett under his other secret name. He had something to say actually about what we were covering with regard to, a couple of things. One, Maui and the wildfires there. Let's see. I don't, let's see. More on Maui. Was this about Maui? Because it doesn't, yeah, here we go. Mastodon, our Mastodon instance, Mastodon party. We both share the same instance. Was down, but let's see, listening in today's show, which was last Wednesday, I noticed this AP article in the Chicago Tribune, which I can't find online yet. Another online disinformation campaign to discourage people from accepting aid from FEMA. You remember that Greg was reporting on mentioning his frustration with the weird insistence by some among the press for perpetuating the story, probably initiated by either Russian disinformation artists, to give them that title. I don't know what else to call them, or MAGA types, but certainly promoting it in symbiotic fashion. It's good for both of them. The idea that somehow Joe Biden wasn't doing either enough or anything at all for the victims of the wildfires in Maui, when in fact just a straight ahead factual look at what had been mobilized would tell you the complete, very much the opposite story. So I guess the other prong of the campaign here was, well, if we can't stop and it is very difficult to stop the president of the United States from mobilizing resources this way, maybe we can minimize the impact and then criticize him for having lesser impact if we spread rumors that somehow it would be bad for you to accept FEMA aid, and then we'll have worse outcomes, and then we'll blame the president for that. So this is an interesting bit. Let's see. FEMA combats posts on Maui aid. Agency disputing false claims in widely shared video. Stories by reporters Karina Fan and Philip Marcello, and a PDF was helpfully attached in case we couldn't get through to the Chicago Tribune. And here it is. So let's see what's up with this story. In the aftermath of the deadly Maui wildfires, some social media users are discouraging residents from accepting disaster aid by falsely claiming the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, could seize their property if they do. Ooh. If you own land in Lahaina, am I pronouncing that correctly? Do not sign anything for FEMA, a woman says on a video circulating widely on social media. That is why they're holding back all of the donations and saying, hey, you want food? Come sign this? ? I don't know why there's a question mark in there. But disaster recovery experts and lawyers stress accepting aid doesn't give FEMA any such powers to take private lands, and that the posts are misrepresenting federal law. The federal agency says the claims are absolutely false and encourages Hawaiians to visit a website it launched recently to address rumors and frequently ask questions in the aftermath of the fires, which have killed more than 100 people. Applying for disaster assistance does not grant FEMA or the federal government authority or ownership of your property or land, the agency writes on the page providing information around the fire. The page then explains that when a person applies for disaster assistance, a FEMA inspector may be sent to verify the damage to their home, and you would expect as much. In fact, most of the people who would be distrustful of the government would demand as much if the aid was going to someone else, of course. Of course, you should go and inspect their property to see that this really is damaged as they say it is. If you're going to give them $50,000 to repair $50,000 worth of damage, go see that there is $50,000 worth of damage. Don't just hand the money over. And of course, when it's you and you want the money fast, that sort of bureaucratic red tape is something you shake your fist at and say is a sign that the government bureaucracy is inefficient by design. But when it's somebody else, that's just good management and fraud prevention. Anyway, it's a good way to stoke their anger anyway, and or create more of it by telling them not to accept any aid, and then those people will then go to the news media and say, I haven't gotten a dime from the federal government. Where the hell are they? Well, they were at your door offering money, but you turned them away because you saw something on YouTube. And if you step back for just a second, can't you see that you're the dummy in all this? Anyway, The page then explains that when a person applies for disaster assistance, a FEMA inspector may be sent to verify the damage to their home. This is one of many factors reviewed to determine what kind of disaster assistance you may be eligible for. Now, the policy could be give out plenty and claw back what turns out to have been improperly granted. And it's odd, but as it turns out, it's the progressives who are always advocating for that, and the conservatives who are always saying, give it out a penny at a time and audit that penny. Anyway, if the results of the inspection deem your home to be uninhabitable, that information is only used to determine the amount of FEMA assistance you may receive to make your home safe, sanitary, and functional. That's not them saying that they will confiscate it and keep it for their own purposes or anything like that. And it's, it's a tragedy that anybody could be convinced of that. But FEMA has approved more than $5.6 million in assistance to nearly 2,000 households in Maui as of Friday. The agency is offering a one-time payment of $700 per household for needs like clothing, food, or transportation, just a temporary aid situation, of course. It will also pay to put survivors up in hotels and motels and has paid out $1.6 million in rental assistance as of Friday. There's much more to the story. We'll continue with it after this short break. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're going to continue with the, if I can find it again, the reading of the story in the Chicago Tribune about the false rumors about what FEMA could do to you if you accept their help with any disaster assistance you might need in Maui. And of course, like so many similar efforts, it's all, of course, based on wholly on invented untruths, but the sort of things that I guess the conspiracy minded and those who distrust the federal government, and there are plenty but within reason, it's fair game to distrust just about anything. But maybe also be open to the possibility that an enormous federal emergency management agency actually does exist. I guess maybe it's hard for people to believe that there's an agency that would exist for the purpose of helping them in their hour of need. Although maybe they also have come to distrust it because they bought into previous propaganda efforts to brand every bit of disaster assistance to other people as fraud in the making. And so therefore it couldn't really be the case that when I'm actually in trouble, the Federal Emergency Management Agency will help me. They're just setting me up for, I don't know what, participating in their massive frauds or something like that. Anyway, so people exploit that and circulate a YouTube video. And I mean, the fact that you could have on the one hand the federal government and the Federal Emergency Management Agency out there saying, we're here And we're organized for the purpose of helping you. One of the reasons we have a federal government, and certainly the reason we have a federal emergency management agency, is to do this. And so it should come as no surprise to you that if you've suffered a disaster that wipes out all your assets, we can help. We can make sure that you're sheltered and fed and get back on your feet and even find the money to help you rebuild your home. The federal government is capable of doing this, but you would weigh that and the entire weight of the federal government versus something I saw on YouTube that says, no, actually. So Constitution, federal government, Washington, D.C., all the taxes you and everybody else pays being collected and allocated for these purposes through acts of Congress on the one hand versus somebody in their car on YouTube on the other hand. And the fact that you would say, well, I definitely need assistance and my house has been destroyed and someone is offering to help. But the person in the car on YouTube who's offering me no money whatsoever says, don't do it. What should I do? What should I do? And it's hard to be super sympathetic, but on the other hand, if you've suffered a disaster, maybe your head isn't in the right place. So, whatever. I'm open to the possibility that it's not your fault and you're being manipulated, because you are. That's how come I'm open to the possibility. But you're going to have to open your mind a little bit here too and accept help. And I know people aren't geared to do that, but anyway, it's just frustrating to see this happening and working. Where do we leave off? FEMA had put lots of money out here and had spent millions in immediate one-time assistance, in rental assistance, in putting people up in hotels and motels while their homes were being rebuilt. And now Andrew Rumbach, the senior fellow with the Urban Institute who studies natural hazards, expressed concern that the false claims could prevent a person, or in fact many people, like all of the residents of Lahaina, from getting critical benefits such as temporary housing. One reason that these messages are dangerous and counterproductive is because people may not get access to the benefits they are due by law, FEMA individual assistance programs, he wrote in an email. The video circulating widely cites the Stafford Act, which sounds kind of authoritative, right? Stafford, that's a white-ish sounding name. Stafford Act, I guess you're trying to claim that it's an act of Congress. Congress is full of white guys. I don't know, probably one or more of them is named Stafford. There might even be a Stafford Act, who knows? Let's see. They cite the Stafford Act, which the narrator claims gives FEMA the power to take private lands. But the federal agency also rejected that notion. FEMA does not have the authority to take land or properties, it said in a statement, pointing to a YouTube video that it released last week. And maybe there's a problem there, right? Like, well, we'll put out our own YouTube video and meet people where they live. If they get their information from YouTube, we'll put our information on YouTube. But on the other hand, that could be maybe counterproductive, where you say, well, on the one hand, there's the federal government, and on the other hand, there's a YouTube video. That makes it sound like it's easy. Side with the federal government on that one. And the YouTube person could say, well, don't forget, where did you see that government video? On YouTube. Yeah, on YouTube. So really, you're being asked to decide between two competing YouTube videos. I mean, that's a false choice too. Like, well, one is produced by the federal government and this massive agency that is dedicated to actually getting people back on their feet after a disaster. Though I'm sure cynics would say, "Oh yeah, right. That's not what they're really about." So if you just frame the choices as being as between two YouTube videos, I guess that doesn't help a great deal. But you could see where people were like, "Well, if people are going to watch YouTube, then we might as well put our stuff there too." So I can't argue against that. Anyway, let's see. So they put out their own YouTube video, and in it, a FEMA official who is also a native Hawaiian urges residents to ignore the misinformation and seek disaster assistance. The clip doesn't provide details from the 1988 federal law, which I guess is a real thing, which guides the process of providing federal aid to state and local governments during natural disasters. Instead, it features a screen grab from a 2020 legal analysis examining whether the federal government could take private property in order to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. But Anthony Della Pelle, a New Jersey property lawyer who wrote the analysis, said his piece is being wrongly applied to the Maui disaster. He maintains that FEMA could, in theory, invoke eminent domain during emergencies based on his reading of the Stafford Act, but he doesn't see any reason to believe that it will happen in Hawaii, as state and local officials are leading the response, not federal authorities. FEMA Press Secretary Jeremy Edwards, in a phone call Friday, declined to address the legal argument, but stressed the agency isn't controlling access or taking anyone's property. We are, however, actively working towards get survivors the assistance that they need and deserve, he said. In either case, FEMA would still have to compensate the property owner. It couldn't just take the land outright, as social media users suggest, said Junia Howell, a sociology professor from the University of Illinois at Chicago. I mean, as scary as eminent domain is, remember that eminent domain is, the concept arises out of the Fifth Amendment takings clause, and that, of course, guarantees that you get some fair compensation for any property taken by the federal government. Now, the fact is that they probably tend to undervalue property when they do take it. But I guess you should know right away that you're speaking to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about if they're saying, yeah, the federal government will just seize your land and kick you out and you have nothing. And it's because of eminent domain. Well, you obviously just don't understand eminent domain. You might quibble over the valuation given, but if you don't even recognize that there is a takings compensation, then you know you're talking to somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. Walk away from that guy. Anyway, through other programs, FEMA provides state and local governments funds to buy out landowners in flood-prone areas, but that's a purely voluntary program and doesn't have anything to do with invoking eminent domain powers, says Jeff, what's this guy's name? Schlegelmilk. That's a mouthful, too. Director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness at Columbia University in New York. I didn't know that there would be a National Center for Disaster Preparedness there. It's a state and local decision on whether to even ask for the money for the program, and homeowners volunteer to participate in the program, he explained in an email. There's no one forcing anyone out of their home. And by the way, once again, you should probably stress, yes, that's for flooding. If you live in a flood-prone area, the government, if you want, will buy you out of your house so that you can move, presumably, to a less flood-prone area. But that's not the problem here. It's the opposite of flooding. It's fire. Howell argued that a more pressing concern for Maui is land speculators trying to turn a quick profit. Hawaii Governor Josh Green has sought to temper those fears by promising to issue a moratorium on the sale of damaged properties as the island rebuilds. So thank you to our good friend John Shiflett, who shared that one with us via the, where was it again? Chicago Tribune, was it? Yes. Okay. So let's see. Catching up on other things that are set aside for us by various audience members. Let's see. Where are we here? Rosalind McGregor had a edition here in which he didn't actually go ahead and record the piece, but shared an article because it's broader than just Michigan, for one thing, or maybe that may not be the reason she decided to do it this way. But she says this article is broader than just Michigan, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. And it's from NBC News, and let's take a look at it. Conservatives are changing K through 12 education. We know that they're certainly after this. And one Christian college is at the center. Now, you've heard enough stories from Michigan and elsewhere about the attacks on education being mounted by conservatives to know that that's probably Hillsdale College. And it is Hillsdale College. And, of course, Hillsdale's in Michigan. But we know, for instance, that Ron DeSantis down in Florida, with the assistance of Chris Rufo from wherever, whatever extraterrestrial planet it is, he beamed down from, trying to turn the new college in Florida into their version of Hillsdale. And Hillsdale comes up as a model all the time whenever conservatives are busy attacking education, public or otherwise, in whatever state. So let's see what's at the bottom of this one. Conservatives are changing K through 12 education, and one Christian college is at the center. Republican officials are turning to Hillsdale College in Michigan for teacher training, textbook reviews, and a curriculum that celebrates American patriotism. So there's a lot of overlap here with a lot of concepts that we've discussed in other contexts. For instance, one, turning to Hillsdale College for teacher training reminds us that of the wacky story that we heard the other day of the judge who wanted to make the Southwest Airlines attorneys go through religious freedom and sensitivity training, but that would be provided to them by, what was it, Americans for, whatever the hell it was. Americans for something, damn it. And, or Alliance Defending Freedom, was that it? Yeah, the ADF group that is also involved very frequently in attacks on American education, whether it's attacks on public schools who have transgender sensitive policies of some kind, or are welcoming of any sort of curriculum making any mention of the fact that, hey, let's not beat up LGBTQ people. That's bad. People need to be free to think they should beat them up, says ADF. Or, of course, fake CRT concerns, or masking in the middle of a pandemic. All the sorts of things that true patriots are against. But yes, the idea that a judge could assign ADF to provide this training, or the stuff we've talked about in the past about the NRA being funded by state governments to provide gun training to people who either shouldn't be getting any, or training teachers to carry weapons in the classroom or whatever, plus other similar situations where right-wing ideological groups are getting paid with taxpayer money, whether it's state or federal taxpayer money, to provide essentially ideological training. For how long were we, improperly training law enforcement officers in Islamophobia and doing it officially and on the public dime? Well, now this spreads to education in teacher training. We're going to teach you how to be a horrible, biased teacher that drives LGBTQ youth to despondency, if not suicide, and do it on the public dime. It's going to be great. Plus, of course, they are, teaching them the curriculum that, quote unquote, celebrates American patriotism. Cover language for right-wing, very often white supremacist ideology. But if you just say it's American patriotism, then it's okay. Just like, why are you working with these seditionists, Secret Service agent? Well, they're patriots and mostly ex-law enforcement or ex-military. Well, if they're such patriots, how come they're not still in the military? Well, reasons. And so there you go. Cover story that works for everybody. This, a piece in NBC News by Tyler Kincaid, who writes, for years, Hillsdale College was best known as a conservative Midwestern school that refused federal funding to avoid government regulations. The private Christian college's Michigan campus features statues of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, yikes, and frequently hosts Republican politicians to give speeches. Recently, though, Hillsdale has become more widely known as the go-to resource for conservatives looking to overhaul K-12 education. For some, the college's name is shorthand for civics lessons that teach children to love America and reject the notion that racism still permeates society. And that's true because we're white supremacists, and we don't want you to think that racism still permeates society, because if you do, then you will purge us from society. And if we tell you that racism is over and there's no such thing, you will let us go, because even though you'll say, well, I don't understand, you seem like white supremacists, you will say, isn't it racism to call us out as white, though? We're just supremacists. Anybody who's superior should rule over everybody else. It's just, coincidental that we think white people are superior to everyone else. Amid national battles over what children should learn in public schools. Oh, and here I'll pause again just to give more recognition to the shooting from over the weekend, which, at this point, I still feel like we've given short shrift. But it's on my mind. But yes, somebody brought up over the weekend, some sharp-tongued wag saying, what happens when kids return to school in Florida and teachers want to discuss current events or help them deal with the tragedy of what just happened in Jacksonville? Is a teacher who tells the truth about what happened in the shooting and who shot whom and why guilty of violating the anti-CRT discussion rules of Florida education now because they correctly attributed the shooting to as a matter of race? Well, that's going to make certain people feel bad about various races, and so therefore you're going to be fired for talking to kids about what they might have seen in the news and how they should process it. Anyway, a good observation and quite true. So amid national battles over what children should learn in public schools, Hillsdale is working to export this vision by setting up charter schools in over a dozen states and publicizing its 1776 curriculum. Remember when Trump was promoting that one, and he was going to have a statue garden as part of it too. Interesting. I wonder if he drew that inspiration from Hillsdale College's decorative scheme here. Anyway, the charter schools would be publicizing its and promoting its 1776 curriculum, which emphasizes American exceptionalism. The college says over 8,400 administrators and teachers have downloaded the curriculum, and a growing number of state and local policymakers are also seeking Hillsdale's guidance. I'm also reminded here by the Law and Economics Institute at George Mason University Law School, which and George Mason University's main campus, which hosts the Mercatus Center, all of which are involved in camouflaged right-wing, quote-unquote, training programs, either for judges in the Law and Economics Institute or for political operatives on Capitol Hill, chiefs of staff, etc., who attend the Mercatus Center retreats in order to be indoctrinated with right-wing propaganda while they're at fancy resorts. Anyway, so now here over 8,400 administrators and teachers have downloaded the curriculum. No free vacations so far for most of them, though. And a growing number of state and local policymakers also seeking Hillsdale's guidance. In Pennsylvania, a school board in the Philadelphia suburbs recently hired a former Hillsdale administrator, over vociferous objections from teachers, to incorporate the 1776 curriculum into the district's coursework and advise administrators on books to remove from libraries. That's the Hillsdale legacy. Hire our former employees. They will teach you which books to burn. In South Dakota, Governor Kristi Noem, Republican, I remember her. Everyone thought she was going to run for president, and then the other Dakota governor did, and no one could remember what his name was. Well, Kristi Noem stuck around in South Dakota in order to bring in one of the college's emeritus politics professors to set new state standards for a social studies curriculum based on Hillsdale's models as part of a broader order to eliminate critical race theory from schools. They should have enclosed that in quotes. Supporters praised the new standards for rejecting, and here's the quote, woke orthodoxy. There's nothing orthodox about it, but anyway, moving on. In Florida, of course, Hillsdale faculty have been tapped to review school curricula and textbooks, lead teacher training sessions, and govern a public college, which is falling apart rapidly before our very eyes. Governor Ron DeSantis, who's seeking the GOP presidential nomination, cited Hillsdale as he touted it ways he's overhauled education in the state during a speech last month at Moms for Liberty's National Summit, where they said, we stand with people who put Hitler on their websites. Hillsdale, which has fewer than 1,700 students, but a $900 million endowment, gives out many of its resources for free. The college's leaders, have said they're getting involved in K-12 schools because they believe students should learn about the very goodness of America's founding. Amid culture war battles dominating school districts, Hillsdale's deep connections to the conservative movement have made it a trusted brand at top of mind for policymakers looking to reverse what they consider a progressive takeover of public education. Again, a good implementation, evil genius, but a good implementation of the conservative idea that if you have plans on the shelves ready to go, as soon as there's an opportunity to wreck public education, if there's a binder somewhere of what to do and what to point to when you're in the middle of wrecking public education, if Hillsdale College is in the binder, that's what's going to come up. Of course, unless the binder was left behind for you by a Democratic administration previously, in which case you throw that out and replace it with a new one. But yes, it pays for them to have contingency plans on the shelves so that in a time of crisis, even when it's a crisis of their own making and an intentional crisis at that, they can pull these books off the shelf. And local lawmakers know if we say the buzzword Hillsdale College, the MAGA crowd will cheer and get on board with whatever it is we're saying we're going to do. We're going to burn down all the libraries in our state because something Hillsdale College. Yay! I was a little nervous about burning down every library, but I'm getting used to that idea. But then you said Hillsdale College, and I recognize that, and, college, that's smart people, so we should probably do what they say. All right. What's appealing about Hillsdale is that there's an off-the-shelf answer, says Jeffrey Hennig, a political scientist at Columbia University's Teachers College. So legislators can express their outrage at what they think has been going on and say, look, here we have an answer, and it's a low-cost thing, because it says so on page 1. Matthew Spaulding, Hillsdale's vice president for Washington operations, said the college's work on K-12 education is an extension of the school's extremely long view on spreading the gospel of patriotism and civil and religious freedom. Remember that it is civil and religious freedom expressed in terms of gospel. That's great. Don't think of us as a public policy institution or a political organization that kind of jumps in the fray here and there with the latest fad, Spaulding said. No, we're a systemic takeover. Think of us that way. In January, DeSantis named Spaulding as a trustee to the new College of Florida, and a top aide for the governor said the goal was to remake the public liberal arts school as a Hillsdale of the South. Spaulding and 4 Hillsdale faculty were also picked by the Florida Education Department to give presentations in a civics training for teachers. By the way, whenever I was, whatever stage of education I was going through from K through 12 or post-secondary education and onward, I was always told you want to have a variety of sources cited in your work and in your papers, etc. And if you simply cite Hillsdale College studies over and over again and hire only Hillsdale College alums and Hillsdale College administrators and professors to revamp education in your state, you've pretty much failed that test. You get an F on the paper. You got to have more varied sources than that. You're not going to get away with this, except, of course, then they get away with it. It's rare for a college to provide so many resources for K through 12 education, according to Chester Finn Jr., an assistant secretary of education in the Reagan administration who holds positions at multiple right-leaning think tanks. And in Hillsdale's teaching model provides something that conservatives are seeking for their children, Finn said, which is both here's what they should learn and let's shield them from what they shouldn't learn. As Hillsdale's footprint has grown, so have protests over its influence. Educators and liberal-leaning parents object to Hillsdale's curriculum, saying it inserts a right-wing worldview into K-12 schools. The American Historical Association has accused the 1776 curriculum of downplaying racism, the Great Migration, and the power of the Ku Klux Klan. Hillsdale, parenthetically, says its curriculum comprehensively covers points of shame in America's history, mentioning slavery more than 3,300 times, except 3,299 of them are saying it was a good thing. What they've done is simply left stuff out in an attempt to shape a vision of patriotism, said James Grossman, executive director of the American Historical Association. What they also are trying to do is replace an approach to teaching that teaches students how to think with an approach that teaches the students what to think. But Hillsdale's critics have had little power to stop Republican office holders intent on reshaping the way American history is taught. It's the hat, said Adam Latz. It's the hat? What are we talking about? A historian at Binghamton University in New York who studies culture war battles over education. The red hat that brought Trump to office. This idea that America can be made great again. I think the educational part of that is that if we're going to make America great again, children need to love it. And they need to learn to love it, and we need to teach them to love it. And so the Hillsdale curriculum is the red hat in textbook form. Oh, okay. I see what you're getting at now. Hillsdale's emphasis on American exceptionalism, Lotz said, and that's L-A-A-T-S, Adam Lotz, said, Hillsdale's emphasis on American exceptionalism appeals to people who, quote, worry that if kids aren't hearing that, they are doing things like running off and joining Antifa and burning down cities. Never mind libraries, I guess. Hillsdale was founded by abolitionist Baptists in 1844 and was open to women and black students from the start, facts that are frequently noted by college officials. And it's a great thing. And what have you done for us lately, you might ask? Hillsdale has spent years of integrating itself in national conservative circles, notably through a Washington, D.C. satellite campus that Ginny Thomas, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, helped establish in 2010. 1844? Yeah, sure. 2010? Okay. Former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, well known for her support of subsidizing private schools, is a major donor to Hillsdale. The conservative writer William F. Buckley bestowed much of his life's work to the college. Larry Arnn, co-founder of the Claremont Institute, famous for being the home of John Eastman right now, a right-wing think tank, became Hillsdale's president in 2000. Arnn serves on the board of the Heritage Foundation as well, a prominent conservative policy organization. Former Vice President Mike Pence and the right-wing activist Chris Rufo are among the college's recent featured speakers, and the school's alumni pepper the staffs of conservative media outlets and the offices of GOP officials. And remember, it's a tiny, tiny place. So that's rather remarkable. In 2020, as conservatives protested the New York Times' 1619 project, that's why they came up with 1776. I guess we can actually skip over that point, except because we've noted it in the past. That's why they named their project the 1776 project, as a rival to and to replace the 1619 project. Historians knocked down their proposal, saying it treated the country's founders as godlike men, minimized women and people of color, and compared 20th century progressive reformers to Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. There are legitimate and serious questions. The role the progressive movement played and how that changed our understanding of the American founding is a crucial one, and a very important one, said Spalding, a Hillsdale dean who was also on the 1776 commission. And I think that good history should go back and grapple with those questions. That's the way they approach it. Now, there's lots more to the article, and obviously I'm not going to get all the way through it any longer, but very well worth your time, and I thank Rosalind for bringing it to our attention. It does have that Michigan angle. Time now, though, for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy and his version of all of today's top stories from around the country and around the world. And perhaps we can pick a good one to tease you with. It's only a short tease. Like in 30 seconds, you'll hear the show. But that's what we do in the closing moments of this one.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
How about this? The Equal Opportunity Employment Commission has filed a racial discrimination suit against the Fort Worth, Texas company for subjecting black workers to displays of nooses and white supremacy symbols. That seems like a good thing to do in the workplace. And a last-minute legal maneuver keeps San Francisco Bay Area cops from testifying about racism within their department. For now, stay tuned.